Hello, hello, beady friends. Welcome to the first joint Michael's Community Classroom class. You'll see there are two of us on the screen today rather than one. I am Meredith from Beadalon and Artistic Wire, and today our very special guest is my friend Danielle from John Bead. And many of you, I'm sure, have taken many classes with her as well. She is the seed bead weaving guru and expert for the Michael's Community Classroom. And I am so glad that we are doing a joint class together today, because it meant for me that I got to hang out with Danielle when we developed the class. And we both realized that just the two of us talking together brought out so many ideas, so many brainstorms, so many what ifs, and many of those ideas, brainstorms, and what ifs we are going to share with you today. So a couple of housekeeping items just in the very beginning. Yvette is in the chat room. So if you have any questions, if I'm going a little too fast, if Danielle is going a little too fast, there's something that you missed, go ahead and feel free to type your question in the chat, and either Yvette or I, if I see it scrolling by, we'll get back to you if we have the answer, and if not, we'll point you in the right direction. This class is being recorded. So for anyone who is watching on the Michael's Community Classroom YouTube channel, the link for the instructions will be in the comments section, I believe, or I think it's in the description right underneath. And then if you make this project, please feel free to post it on your socials and use the hashtag Beadalon and make it with Michael so that we can see what you have made as well. So what is this class? We are going to be doing weaving on a bead loom, start to finish. So in many of the classes that you might see or tutorials that you might find, I think that people are very good at showing how to start a looming project, which of course we are going to show that as well. But one of the things that I think doesn't get talked about and doesn't get addressed as much is how to finish it off. And so Danielle and I are going to do a little tag team back and forth and talk about all of those different things: starting a project, then of course looming a project, and then a couple of different ways of finishing a project. For our class today, we are going to be using the jewel loom. And this is what the jewel loom looks like when it is warped. If this is your first looming class, there will be a lot of new terms and new terminology. And that would actually be what I would love to know from the people who are joining me live. First of all, did you or have you watched on the replay the first jewel loom class that I did way back in August? Can you even believe it? It's almost a year ago now that we've been doing these great classes for the Michael's Community Classroom. So how did you participate in that class, and have you used the Beadalon jewel loom? So those are the things that I would love to know in the chat, so that I can kind of gauge a little bit, and Danielle can gauge a little bit as well, kind of where we are. I always like speaking to the class, so I know, you know, of course, everybody already knows this already, or, oh, I have to make sure that I talk about what the vocabulary words are more than once. So let's see, I think that is all from me. Danielle, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about kind of where you're coming from. I'm going to read through these comments real quick, and then we'll get started with the materials.
Sounds great. I'm Danielle Wicks, and I'm a content creator for John Bead. I love seed beading. I love looming. And so I was really excited to get a chance to do this project with Meredith. The jewel loom is really versatile and really fun. And it's just a really great complement to our seed beads in the size 8, because the way that it's warped is perfect for a size 8 seed bead. And so it made our project really easy today. And I loved Meredith's ideas for how to end the project, because that's probably my biggest struggle with looming is, well, how do I finish it? And so I'm really excited to work through that and share that with you guys today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. And while you were talking, I just went back and looked through the comments, and it looks like many people are joining us for the very first time. So that's good for me to know and make sure that I don't gloss over some things that I might not spend as much time if everyone is old hat. But what you will find, especially with the jewel loom, is that it is a very good place to start. There are a ton of different looms out there on the market, but the jewel loom, I find, is a very simple way to get started and to finish. So you'll notice over here, Finn always likes to come and say hi. He's going underneath the desk now because he knows that it's time to take the overhead camera and talk about the materials that we are going to be using for our class today. So Felicia, if you don't mind, go ahead and take that top camera for me. And it looks like somebody might be unmuted also. So just double check and go through and make sure that we are all on the mute. Okay, so our first and most important thing that we are going to be using today is the jewel loom. Now, the jewel loom was designed and developed by my friends and a friend to Beadalon and the beading community, Juliana Avalar. And she is an avid loomer. We just bought this camera up just a little bit so that we can see the whole thing. And there are a couple of things on this loom that are unique and really make it a great place, like I said, to begin, but also a great place to continue your looming journey. Perhaps you have a kind of the standard starter loom that everybody finds in their arts and crafts class. This is kind of the next level of loom, and you'll notice that it is. Let's get a good. There we go. It's bendy, but it's not rubber. So when we're setting this up, something to be aware of is that it bends, but you don't want to bend it so much that it cracks, okay? Because it's a piece of plastic, it's a bendable piece of plastic, but it can crack if you don't do it correctly. A couple of fun other parts of the loom are these little buttons here on the back, okay? And those buttons become very important when we warp our loom. The other thing to note are these ridges here on the side. These ridges are what you are going to lay your beading thread, your warp thread in, and however many of the ridges you skip will determine the spacing in between your beads. So for example, if you're using a size 11 seed bead, you wouldn't skip any of the ridges. You would go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. But today we are going to be designing with a size 8 seed bead. And so we are actually going to skip a ridge in between. An upcoming project that Danielle and I actually just brainstormed yesterday is a loomed piece using bugle beads. And for that, you would have to lay the bead on top and figure out how many ridges that you would skip. But it's great because there's so many ridges and there are the perfect spacing so that you can adjust that amount depending on what beads you are using. So the last part of the jewel loom that I like to point out are these two little holes here. And those two little holes are very important because that is where the rod goes. Now, the whole reason why the jewel loom is because we are eventually going to warp it so it looks like this. It's like a nice smile. It always makes me smile to see the jewel loom smile. So in order to make that shape, to make that happen, that's where this rod comes in. Now, the first thing that you want to do with this rod is you want to poke it in this bottom hole. And it usually goes in, just like that. I had to kind of wiggle it in a little bit, but it shouldn't be something that you ever force. And that's a good thing to remember for all jewelry applications and all jewelry tools. If you're having to force something, if it's being uncomfortable, you probably need to take a step back and reevaluate how you are using your tool or your materials. So the way to get this hook into the top is very gently. And there are two techniques that I use in order to do it. The first is I actually rest it against my belly and then hook the top in. But in the interest of demonstrating, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put it down on my bead mat here. And again, it's a gentle movement to bend this up and poke that in. I'm going to try to get a little closer. I'm going to do that one more time with my camera, just a little bit closer so you can really see what's going on. Now, sometimes see how it's not coming out right away like that? What I found is if you flip it over, it should, there we go, it should come right back out. So I'm going to show that again just a little bit closer. Okay, so I hook the bottom of my peg in there, and then in the top, I want to bend this up. And okay, now I'm even out of frame. Let's try that one more time. I want to bend it up and then bend that bar right in. And so now you can see it gives you that nice smile. Okay, so I put my tray of materials away while I was showing that. So that is how to set up the jewel loom. The other materials that we are going to be using today are B-Lon. Now this is a Tex 210 nylon cord from Beadalon. It is super strong. It doesn't stretch. You don't need to condition it. And at Michael's, it's available in the white, the gray, and the black. Now I believe that Danielle is going to be demonstrating with the black today. So I actually decided that I'm going to demonstrate with a white, because why not? One of the themes of our class today, and one of the reasons why it's so great to have two different designer/instructors teaching, is you get to see how two different people do the technique to achieve a similar goal, but might not do it the same way. And it's going to be really fun when Danielle starts doing the actual looming to see some of the differences between her technique and my technique. But the Beadalon is a great thread for using for your warp. For the weft, now I am seeing in the comments that there are many people here who are seasoned loomers, but I can't stress enough, because it took me a couple of years to be able to learn the difference between the warping and the wefting. So the weft, when you're looming, and it's the same for fiber arts as it is for beading, the weft is what you use to go back and forth to add your beads, your ribbon, your embellishments, whatever you're adding, that is your weft. And today what we're using is Wildfire. And I believe Danielle will be demonstrating with the black and the 0.006. And I am going to be demonstrating with the white in the 0.008, both of which of course are available at your local Michael's. But again, I wanted to stress how it is often very easy to substitute materials that from what is recommended in the instructions. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have to use exactly what it is. But when I'm teaching classes, if there is a way for you to use what you have on hand, then I will do my best to point that out. So I'm going to be using the 0.008 Wildfire. And for those of you who are not familiar with Wildfire, this is my stringing material of choice. If you go back and watch the last class that I did for Beadalon, I went over 10 different stringing materials in 10 different projects and 10 different applications. And you'll hear me say several times that Wildfire is my favorite one to use. Okay, so we talked about Beadalon. Of course, we're going to need some scissors to cut things. And then you'll also see me using a thread burner. This is the Beadalon brand of thread burner, but there is one available in Michael's as well. And I'm going to ask Danielle really quickly to come on and talk about the seed beads that we are going to be using today. Danielle.
Yeah, it looks like you've got my favorite colors already. There's the Purple Passion, and then I'm going to be working today with the Apricot mix. And then you also have the Retro Blue mix, which to me always looks green, but it's called Retro Blue. Those are mixes of 4 colors. So they are great for color blocking. And our pattern today is a chevron pattern that is made with the size 8 apricot mix. And Meredith is going to surprise you with a different colorway.
I sure am. All right, Felicia, you can come back to my overhead now, please, or my face, either way. Wait, I told Felicia, who is our Michael's moderator, I told her that we would be keeping her on our toes today with all of the camera switches, but she's doing a great job. Like I said in the beginning, this is the first joint class. So it's a little bit of an experiment for all of us. Now that's Danielle's overhead camera. You need to go ahead and take mine because I'm going to be doing the beginning part of our warping. There we go. See, we should have come up with like a secret like code words for which camera to take. And there are some really good suggestions in our comments that I would like to mention, that you can use all of different kinds of products to do the warping and the wefting. You can use thread, you could use Wildfire on both sides, you could use Beadalon on both sides, you can do leather. It's really up to whether the materials will fit through your beads and whether or not it is pleasing to your eye and to your pattern. So today we are working with a size 8 seed bead, and that as I mentioned, as we were talking about the jewel loom, is very important to consider when you are warping your loom. And that's what we're going to do right now. Now, again, I am using my white B-Lon, and you can see I've already done quite a bit with my white B-Lon, but we're going to use this. And for those of you who are old seasoned hat at doing loom work, I may or may not have a couple of good tips and new tricks up my sleeve for you to try. So traditionally, and in the last time that I taught this class, when you are using when you are warping the jewel loom, what I have been teaching is you come around and you tie your thread, whatever it is that you're using, if it's Beadalon, if it's Wildfire, if it's leather, you tie that first and foremost onto the button on the back of the jewel loom. However, today we're going to do things a little bit differently. Okay, we are going to start by tying our warp thread over here to the side button. Okay, so if you're used to doing it the other way, just stay with me. This is a transition to kind of a new kind of looming that I have been playing around with our favorite jewel loom, and I think you'll like it once you see where I'm going. So stick with me and have faith. So I'm just going to tie this in an overhand knot. I'm sorry, not an overhand knot, a surgeon's knot. So I did right over left once, and then I'm going to go left over right once and twice. Now that is the same knot that I would have done had I attached it to the button, but like I said, I'm doing things a little bit differently. So just have faith. Okay, so now I'm going to pull this down here because I want to make sure that I'm not working from here. I want there to be no slack in my Beadalon, and you'll notice I'm keeping that roll in my hand. And I like how these little bobbins of the Beadalon are so great for this technique. They're just the right size to fit in your hand and be able to do all of what we need to do. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to hook the Beadalon over around the button on the back. And you can see I'm going to be turning my my loom over and over a couple of times as I'm doing this. So I'm going to flip this back around to the front, and I'm going to pull my Beadalon through one of the ridges. Now I usually go I don't know. I know that I'm going to have 5 different ridges. It's not centered, and that's okay. If you want to center it, that's fine. If you want to work all the way over here, that's fine too. I just happen to notice that I generally start kind of right here. It's not very, very scientific or very specific, but that is what I do. And I'm just going to bop this. I'm going to probably bop my camera up and down a couple times just so that you can really see what I'm doing. And I'm going to try to work on the diagonal. So we'll see if all of this works out for all of us. Now I'm going to pull this all the way down here. And again, if you want, you can count the number of ridges across, but you just kind of want to guesstimate. It does not matter one bit if the number here matches the number here. What will matter is going to happen in just 1 second. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back around to the back. So I'm working front to back, front to back, front to back. And I'm going to hook that Beadalon around the back of that button. And I'm keeping pretty good tension here. I'm not keeping death grip tension, but I'm keeping tension enough so that there is no slack in that warp thread. And now you can see I'm skipping one ridge and I'm coming back around to the front and pulling it down, skipping one ridge, coming back here. And if your thread bops out of the ridge like that one did there, you can see I'm just kind of balancing everything, holding everything, and just moving it where I want it to be. Now I'm going to do that again, come around that button, skip one, come all the way down here, skip one, and just keep going back and forth and back and forth. And the more you do, the faster and easier I find to do it. Now, the thread just jumped out of my hand, but that's totally fine because everything is still keeping with the tension and keeping around those back buttons. So if for some reason everything falls apart, no big deal. Just start over at the beginning. There's no reason to worry if your warp thread doesn't quite work the first time. Just try again. So what we're going to do is our pattern, and by our, I mean the lovely pattern that Danielle came up with, is a chevron pattern. And that chevron pattern is 5 beads across. And so if you're doing a pattern that's 5 beads across, you will need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 warp threads, right? Because the threads are on the outside and the beads are on the inside. So because our pattern today calls for 5 beads, we are going to do, we're going to do 6 warp threads. And since I went for this little bit of a different way of starting, I'm going to do the same little bit of a different way of finishing as well. And to do that, I'm going to, I'm going to try to do it so that everybody can see, not just you guys, but me as well. I'm going to pull out more thread than I need, but it's always better, especially when you are tying knots, to have more thread rather than less thread. And especially because I forgot my very last step, which is to come around here on the back. And I just want to make sure that that warp thread is right in the right place around the back. And now, since I did that knot over here, I'm going to do the same thing over here. Again, if you're familiar with the jewel loom, generally we knot underneath here, but we're trying a different way for a couple of different reasons. The first is that this makes it easier to remove the design from the loom in a new way that I'm going to show when we get to that part. It also is setting up a new technique of finishing that Danielle and I are working on. But it is also actually the way that the original design for the jewel loom in the instructions was set up to work. And so I'm experimenting around with it a little bit. And I really like the way that this whole system is coming together. So keep all of that is to say, keep your ears and your eyes open so that you know where we're going with all of this. Now, this is, in my opinion, the beauty of the jewel loom and the most important step as far as I'm concerned. And that is removing this bar in the middle here that's holding it together. Some people forget that step. It's not the end of the world. However, you really, the whole mechanism by which this works is because of the removal of this bar. And I will show you how to do that. Let's see, I'm going to bop this up just a little bit. And it's a very careful process, and it involves a couple of different things. And as many things, me talking through it makes it sound a lot more complicated than it actually is. So I'm just going to kind of hold my fingers up here on the threads. And once again, this rod is a little finicky. So I'm going to come around and try to get it out over on this end. And for some reason, it's a little overbent, and I'm not 100% sure why that is, but I'm actually glad because now I can come and show you how to solve that problem. The world is an imperfect place, and sometimes the rods are a little finicky and a little not working the way that we want them to. So all I'm doing is I'm coming here and I am just bending it back with my chain nose pliers. Sometimes we gotta work with our tools. Sometimes they work with us. But see how I just bent it back up? I didn't bend it in half. I just kind of worked with my tool until I was able to release that tension bar. And what that does is it makes your warp threads nice and strong. Will it work with it in there? Yes. But the whole point is taking it out so that the tension that the plastic gives makes those warp threads really nice and tight. And so now, since we went through soup to nuts, how to set up the jewel loom, I'm going to turn class over to Danielle, who is going to talk us through the pattern for the chevron that she so wonderfully included in the instructions for class. And she's going to talk you through how she starts the jewel loom weaving process. And then I'm going to show you how I do it just a little bit differently.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith. I've got the my loom set up, and it's got 6 warp threads on there. And the pattern in the handout will have rows of 5 size 8 seed beads across. And when I build my patterns, I tend to work from the bottom up. And I never realized that was unusual until just recently. And so that's how I'm going to be demoing it. And how I follow my pattern is I'll take my mix and empty it out and move my colors into size into A, B, and C. And so the root beer is some A, and the copper is B, and the silver is my C. And if you're using a different mix, you would just want to pick which color you'd like to be your A, B, and C. But for me, it's going to be the root beer, copper, and silver as my A, B, and C. And then I take my pattern, and I've got a little kind of mini post-it here. And I use it to show where I am in my pattern. So after I loom this row, I'll take it off and move it up and cover up the next row. So that's kind of my style for doing it. Some things you'll need, of course, the Wildfire. And then I'm going to be using the jewel loom needle. And you can also just use one of the size 10 beading needles too. That will work out great. And about 70 inches of thread might get you through this pattern. depending on how much tail you leave. I like to leave a lot of tail, so I have something to weave in. Adding thread in looms and loom designs is really easy, so don't sweat that. Cut a length that's comfortable for you to work with. I'm just going to trim that and get one of my needles out. Okay. And if you're having any trouble threading your needle, this one went in really easy for me, but you can always flatten it with chain nose pliers and I'll help you get it through. I learned that from Meredith. She taught me that. Thank you for that. That saved me so many times.
That is the most important part of the entire class, I feel like sometimes, is learning that tip for threading the needle.
Yep, exactly. I agree. And I just folded it over probably 10 inches or so. It doesn't really matter how much you fold over. And I'm going to move down to my tail here. And I'm going to leave enough tail to weave in, so probably about another 10 inches there. Come up in between your leftmost warp thread and the one next to it. So let's see. You'll want to come up in between these two. So in between this one and the next one. So I'm in between those. Got about a 10-inch tail here. And I'm just going to tie a double knot or a surgeon's knot. And it's, I'm working about 1.5 inches up from the bar. That's not super critical. You can work closer to it. If you are planning on making a bracelet that's a little bit longer, you know, work as close as you're comfortable to the edge there without going too close, because you do need room to get under it. But for me, that's a comfortable length for being able to get underneath my, my warps. So I've got my needle end here, got a double knotted Wildfire to the leftmost strand. It's just knotted onto that leftmost strand. And you go underneath. So I'm bringing the thread under all those warps. And now I need to pick up my row 1. So going back to my pattern, row 1 is A, B, 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 A. So my A is that really cute root beer color. So I got an A, and B is copper. There's 3 B's and an A. Get those on there. And remember that thread is still passing underneath these warp threads here. And so I'm going to come along. Oops, I've got hooked to my keyboard tray. Just 1 second here. There we go. I'm unhooked. And I'm going to guide these seed beads to sit in between each one. Now, they kind of just popped in for me. They don't always do that. On occasion, I've had it happen where I have to really adjust them. And you can start from, you know, one side and just work each one in. But I'll show you guys how to do that just in case that happens to anybody. So one way you could do it is you could just start 1 bead and 2 bead. That can be, it's more difficult to do with small beads than with the 8s. With the 8s, I feel like it's just kind of a breeze. But if you're working with smaller beads someday, just know that that's something you can easily do. And so remember that this Wildfire thread is passing underneath the warps. Well, we're going to go back through those beads, but we're going to make sure we stay above them this time. And that way they lock in. You'll know if it doesn't happen right, if you've gone underneath the warp thread, because the bead will fall out and it won't stay in place. And another way you can test it, before you pull your needle through, see if you can get it to slide. If you get it to slide, then not only do you have it, but you haven't nicked any warp threads. So something that happens, and the jewel loom needle is great because it's not as sharp as a regular beading needle, so it's less likely to pierce your warp threads, these ones. If you were to pierce them, it wouldn't be able to slide, and that's going to be important depending on how you're finishing it. So just something to think about. For the purposes of this project, if you were to go through one, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would, it's just a good practice. And so if yours are wonky after you pull your thread through and they're moving around, something you can do is you can take a business card, or I'm actually just going to use the edge of my B-Lon package. You can just line them up. And I'll probably do this a few times as I add rows. So there's row 1. And my row 2, I'm going to cover up my row 1. I did that. I need 2 A's, a B, and 2 A's. So again, we need to pass under the warps. So going underneath. And now I need 2 of the A's. 1 of the B's, which is my copper color here. 2 A's. And for this pattern, because it's not a wide piece, you don't really get the advantage of this really long needle. When you're working on one of those really long loom, like wide loom pieces, it's so handy because you can string them all on there. And that's why this needle is so long. It's for, you know, more epic loom designs, so you can easily string those. And so again, I'm going to align all these beads just to pop up in between those warp threads. And now really carefully, I'm going to try to pass through all the beads, moving over the top of the warps this time. So going over the top of them through the beads. And just pull that tight. And I'm gonna find that, there it is. Just gonna straighten it out. And as you see, this is free moving. That's the cool thing about looming. Okay, and then row 3. I'm gonna cover up that row, I just did it. Now I need to introduce a color C. 3 A's and a C. So C was my silver color. So I'm picking up one of those, and then 3 of my color A's. And then a silver color C. And underneath here. So I passed underneath the warp threads. I'm going to align those beads. And then just trying to pass on top of the warp threads through those beads on the back pass. With every row you add, it'll get less likely for them to move kind of sideways. They're going to stay. I'll straighten them out here, and after this I probably won't have to do that again. All right, and I haven't been watching the chat. If anyone has any questions, feel free to, I'll try to pay attention to that. I'm moving up to my next row, which is 2 C's, an A and 2 C's. Yeah, 1, 2 will be more than enough. So I used so for example, I've got a finished one here, and I have all this left, plus what I just dumped out up here, which is probably a lot as well. So yeah, I would say at least 2, maybe 3 bracelets could be made with 1 tube of our size 8 mixes. Okay, and so that next row is 2 C's, an A and 2 C's. And let's see, so sometimes I have the beads over here. This is just my style, but I like to have the beads on this side because this is where I load them. I pass underneath those warps. And oh, someone was asking where I find the August video. So that michaels.com/classes, click on jewelry, and all those videos will be there. And then you'd probably want to select by presenters, select Beadalon, and you can browse to it that way. So if you pierce the warp thread on this design, it's not going to be a big deal if you pierce the warp thread. But the reason I wanted to share that is because there are future projects that Meredith and I are dreaming up that would be really cool. A finishing technique that's very cool if you can slide them. For this one, don't sweat it. If it's pierced it, don't pull your work out. It's still gonna, right, Meredith? It's still gonna work for the purposes of this design.
Oh, 100%. Yep.
Yeah, so just want to double check that, but I think that's okay for this one. I was just sharing it mainly for future. So let's see, that was 2 C's, 1 A, and then we've got 2 C's. I'm gonna come up underneath there and line those up. And after you get these rows going, they're just gonna pop into place really easily. And I'm gonna share another tip really quick while I'm here about piercing warp threads. If this was a design where that was important and you wanted to just be double sure that it didn't happen, you can take what's it called? The eye side. So this is my eye side of my needle, and you can do your back pass with the eye side. It's kind of, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't go in as easy, but it is a pretty much surefire way to not pierce any of those warps. Because it's, you know, it's very dull, so it's not going to go through your thread. And so the pattern I'm using, I think I saw somebody ask a question about where do I find loom patterns. This one was in, the one I'm using right now was part of the class download handout. So it's one of the, I printed it really tiny here, but it's one of the pages in that document. But loom patterns in general, you can find those everywhere. You can even make your own with just some regular graph paper and colored pencils, which is one of my favorite things to do. And so let's switch to the next row, and that is going to be a B, 3 C's and a B. That's hard to see, but that's what I'm doing, just using that Post-it to keep my place. I did bring that needle underneath. I kind of do that without thinking about it, but right after I finish a row, I just bring that thread under the warps. And then I need a B. B is my copper color. 3 C's, which is my silver, and a B, my copper color. And then they pop right in between each one. And I'm putting some pressure on them from underneath. That's another way that, you know, you can avoid piercing those warps. And then just coming through. Use the eye side again. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all the, you know, all these steps. So you just repeat this now, continuing on, following your pattern until you reach a length that you like, and keeping in mind how much your clasp is going to use. So I've got 2 B's, a C and 2 B's. And so, yeah, I was seeing in the chat, something popped up about the direction I'm working. So I didn't realize this was unusual until I taught a class. I was teaching a peyote class, not a loom class, but I started working from the bottom to the top, not realizing my word chart was printed out top to bottom. Yeah, that was an interesting learning moment for me.
So Danielle, that's actually probably a really good transition back to my mat, because I work from top to bottom. And so I want to show that, but then I also want to show another really quick tip. This is actually what I made as Danielle was explaining everything. And I don't know, Danielle, if you do this or if the other people who are watching in our chat right now do this. I would love to know if you or they think that this is cheating or not. But if I'm working on a pattern, and especially with this chevron pattern that is so, so pretty, I'll do the first pattern repeat, I guess I would say, by looking at the pattern as it is on paper. But then what I will do is I will actually use my piece as the pattern, because I find looking either at a written pattern or at a graphed pattern a little challenging for me, just to keep going back and forth and back and forth. And so, for example, what I know here is that this row is the same as this row. It's my pink, 2 purples and a pink. So I know my next row is going to be this one here. So I'll kind of put my thumbnail there. Let me bring this down just a little bit closer if anyone's on a smaller screen. I'll put my thumbnail at that one. And so then I'll know that I will pick up the beads in this row. So instead of going back and forth and moving a sticky note, after I have gotten that first repeat of the pattern, I will just use my loom as the guide. And I find that A, it helps me loom a lot faster. And B, I actually don't make as many mistakes because I am looking at where I'm going and where I've been as I'm going along. Do you do that, Danielle, or do you always work from a pattern?
I hadn't thought of that. No, I think I've always just creature habit done it this way.
Isn't that interesting? I love, again, and I can't stress it enough, how wonderful it is to do this joint teaching opportunity, because it helps me learn, and also hopefully will help other people learn as well. I actually had forgotten that trick of going back with the eye of the needle rather than using the pointy part of the needle, so that you don't pierce it. And that is going to become very handy for us as we are going forward. So yeah, that's something that I learned today. So again, as I'm going down on my design, I know I just did this row, and now I'm going to do this row. So it's 2 pinks, a light pink, and then 2 pinks. And it's funny, you're using that apricot mix is actually my favorite John Bead mix of seed beads, but I've really become quite fond of this one as well.
That was a beautiful colorway.
And we are working with size 8 seed beads, but gosh, you could use so many different sizes and kinds. And we were playing around with doing a super duo project on the loom. It's a little more challenging, but it's definitely kind of for a 201 level class to do a beaded loom project with super duos is certainly doable. All right, so we've gone through, and really you just keep on going until, as Danielle mentioned, your bracelet is going to be the length that you want it to be. Now, how do you know that your bracelet will be the length that you want it to be? Well, I like to use the eyeball technique or the technique of measuring it against something that I have already made. But more technically and more precisely, what you can do is grab a ruler, measuring tape. That's what I'm trying to say. Trying to get rid of the tickle in my throat as well. And you want to measure that around the thickest part of your hand. So for me, that's kind of where that my thumb bone juts out right here. And I know that this spot is going to be about 8 inches. And that is important given the finishing technique that we are going to be using today. If you are using a clasp, then of course you would want to measure it around your wrist and then subtract the amount of space, usually about 1 inch or so, that your clasp is going to be taking up. But we're not teaching clasp adding in this class. We are teaching making an adjustable clasp. So this is actually the technique from that last August class. And we are going to do a similar technique, but we're actually going to change it up a little bit. So for those of you who saw the class, it will be new. And for those of you who didn't see the class, it will be an incentive to go back to the Michael's Community Classroom. It's actually, you can also find it on their YouTube channel. You can search back through all of the different videos from both Danielle and I, and of course, all of the other makers who do amazing classes. Okay, so I have my my whole design here that I finished. It's all been worked up, and I actually did add, as Danielle had mentioned, I added a thread here. For some reason, I think that I ended up piercing the thread because I'm having a little bit of trouble pulling that end through. But again, I like to show how I solve problems in beading. I just pulled that through with my chain nose pliers, and this will relax eventually. The way that I like to snip these ends off, no matter what, whether it's something that I knotted in to add my extra thread, or if I am snipping my Wildfire for any reason, is using the cord cutter to cut and seal my ends. I want to be careful that I don't cut and seal too much, And I also need to have fresh batteries in my cord cutter, but you get the general idea. It cuts through that cord really, really well. Now, regardless of like me, you work top to bottom, or like Danielle and you work bottom to top, you will have to weave in at least this this thread and then your first thread as well. And now Danielle knows that I am a knotter and she is a weaver. So I'm going to do both. I'm going to show weaving this end in. So Danielle, you can feel free to chime in, but I just kind of pick and choose. There's really no rhyme or reason to how I do it. I might do 3 here and then 2 down here. Do you have kind of a specific formula that you follow when you weave your ends in?
Well, so when I'm adding thread, I leave whatever's left of my old working thread aside for that moment. And then what I'll do is I'll bring my new thread in to that same row, coming out in the same direction, and leave a tail over here and just let it hang for a while. Then I'll start looming a few more rows. And at that point, I'll come back, and sometimes I don't actually weave them in until after I've taken it off. But I think it's totally okay to weave it in while it's on. I think the only reason I do that is because sometimes I wiggle it around a lot. And once you do your weave in, it might not slide as easy.
What about for your threads at the very end? Do you do that when it's off the loom as well?
I do, yeah. I take it off and weave in, but I don't think there's anything wrong with weaving in on the loom. Also, I think both of those methods are great.
Yeah, it's interesting how different people do it different ways. And then there's me who likes to knot things. Okay, so I kind of went around in a little bit of a zigzag and then a roundy kind of a thing. And then I'm gonna come and pick the thread on the side there. I'm just gonna put my needle underneath it and pull it back and tie an overhand knot. If I can do that without bumping my camera and without losing everything. Okay, and I'm actually, for this part, I'm gonna work vertically. I think that'll be a little bit easier for me and for everybody else to see. All right, so I'm just going to snip this end off here and give it a little sealy seal. And then we're going to pretend like I have added a little bit extra. Remember how when Danielle was showing how she started off, she left a really nice tail in the beginning to weave back in. This I just knotted on, and I am just going to give it this a little cut off. There are 2 schools of thought when it comes to tying off thread in bead weaving, knotting or not knotting. And I think that the non-knotters would say that the knotting is wrong, but I am not a purist, so I do not mind doing the knotting. Okay, so now how are we going to get this guy off of our jewel loom? So generally, and what I have taught in the past, is you come in here with your scissors and cut it off. But we're transitioning to a little bit of a different way of doing this. And again, I like showing different ways of achieving the same goals. So perhaps you won't like this way. Go ahead and continue with the scissors cutting off way. Totally fine. But what this allows is just for a little bit longer of the warp threads to work with. It also allows for setting up for a slightly different technique. But it's just, this is the habit that I'm getting into now for taking my pieces off. So I think I'm going to start on that side that has the knots on the sides of the button, not the buttons, of the I think these are called buttons too. I'm not 100% sure. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to very gently, again, this can snap, right? Because it's plastic. So you don't want to bend it so far that you snap it. But the idea here is what you are going to do is you're going to create enough slack so that with a pair of chain nose pliers, you can pull these loops off from the button. And you can see I'm just moving that the loom ever so slightly to give myself enough room to be able to do that. So by doing it that way, you also alleviate that snapback that the loom gives you when you lose the tension. Now, of course, up here, these do need to be snipped off, and I'm just going to snip them off as close to that knot as I can get. But then, since I took those loops off on this side, I have the loops off on that side as well. And now I'm just going to take a moment and give myself a little bit more working room here on my space. I think that is actually what is going to be the most helpful, is having a nice bit of room to work with. Okay, so I had mentioned that sometimes finishing off designs can be challenging. And I had also mentioned that there are several different ways of doing that. In past classes, we have shown the twisting together of the Nylon Cord technique. Today, what I'm going to do is actually a 5-strand braid. Okay, I call it a hollow braid. I don't know if it's actually called a hollow braid, but I'm going to do a 5-strand braid, which is going to create these ends here. And then we are going to do a macrame knot in the middle. So again, this is a technique that is very secure. It's adjustable, which I love. I make almost all of my bracelets these days adjustable because for several different reasons, not the least of which is wrist size is never or not always indicative of body size. So I don't want to make a bracelet that is not going to fit somebody that I give it to. I also find it very easy to get these bracelets on and off by myself. And so I like being able to get my bracelets on and off by myself. So to secure this, to do my 5-strand hollow braid, I'm actually using a tool that was not listed on the instructions, but it's the right tool for this job for me. This is the Beadalon tying station. You'll see this guy featured in classes that my friend Sarah Ellis does for Beadalon, and I believe she has even one coming up. But she definitely has several in the archives of the Michaels Community Classroom. Can you tell I love the archives? It's such a wonderful, wonderful resource of these free classes that we do. But this is not listed in the materials list on the instructions that were sent out, but Yvette did just post the link. But this is the Beadalon tying station, which is also available in Michaels. And why I'm using this is because it's a great way of securing and holding these threads in place. If you had a clipboard, that would certainly work. If you wanted to use like a binder clip, that would work too. I just like having it secured so that I can work my threads in a braid. And it doesn't even have to be straight. It's really just holding this so that it's almost like a third arm, or like a significant other who is holding on to your piece for you. Now, if you think that your one side might not be long enough, and this side looks like it's going to be just long enough, but it might be a little bit short. So what you can do, and why to answer that person from way back, why it's important not to pierce your work thread, is it is sometimes possible to move your loom work down just a little bit to adjust it. I am not sure that I am going to be able to do that because of how I went in with my extra thread right there. I can just tell that it's not going to move the way that I wanted it to, unfortunately. But that's a really good illustration of why it's important not to pierce your warp thread. I'm able to get just a little bit more space by moving my beads down. So I don't know, Danielle, if you ever have to do that, but sometimes I find that I haven't left myself quite enough on the ends, and I need to kind of zhuzh my beads around a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I ran into that a lot.
Yeah, it's just kind of comes with the territory. So I'm going to work on that short side first. I'm going to come down and let's get in frame. I'm just putting all 5 of those threads underneath the top of my tying station. And of course we have loops down here. And so I'm going to go ahead and just cut those loops. So I have 6 beads. And actually, this is not a hollow braid. It's actually a fishtail braid. I'm trying to figure out how to get this so that it stops moving around. Okay. So you might remember a fishtail braid from camp, from braiding your hair, or from any number of different places. But basically all you do is you make 2 bundles of threads. So I have 6 threads, so that's easy. If it were 5, which I had originally had in my head, because we're using, of course, 5 beads, not 5 threads. Trying to figure out a way to jerry rig my tying station so it stops moving around on me so much. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the furthest thread on either side and bring it to the center. And I'm going to bring the furthest thread over here and bring that to the center. And I'm going to hold everything pretty tight. Furthest thread over here, bring it to the center. Furthest thread here, bring it to the center. And if I'm holding everything nice and securely, my braid or my fishtail should start forming. And once I get down a little ways, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So we've given you, both in the instructions and live, 3 different ways of doing this. So you can either do that twisting technique, like I showed in the first video, and like we mentioned in the instructions, and that you can see right here. You can do a regular braid, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I do the other side. I'm just going to quickly get this all down, or this fun fishtail, which is just, it's kind of different, right? To do a braid with 6 different sides, it makes it just look just a little bit different, a little bit something that someone's going to look at it and be like, wait a second, that's not a traditional braid. That looks a little bit different. What's going on there? So coming up, we have both Danielle and I, as I'm finishing up this braid on this side, I'll mention more and more of these free classes for Michaels. So if you are catching us on the replay, definitely head on over to the Michaels Community Classroom page on their website and check out all of the upcoming classes, of course, by me and by Danielle, but also by all of the other amazing makers out there. This class will be posted in about 24 to 48 hours. So if there is something that you missed, or you came in a little bit late, or you want to see the technique over and over again, you can feel free to do that. And of course, whenever you make something and post it on your socials, which I hope you do because you would be so proud of it, go ahead and tag not only make it with Michaels, but also Beadalon, so that we can see what you've made. And then also, if you want to hang out with me and see what I'm up to, both for Beadalon and for myself, you can feel free to follow me on Instagram. I am at Meredith Joy Designs. And I believe, Danielle, you are at Danielle Wicks with an ES Jewelry.
Yep, that's right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I would have felt bad if I had gotten it wrong. All right, so I think that that's probably going to be long enough. And are you doing a 6-strand braid as well over there, Danielle?
The fishtail one, I ended up just doing where I treated each of my 2 strands as one and just did a regular braid.
Perfect. Can you show that and just talk through that? That I was going to do that on the other side. So that's perfect that you're doing that.
I tried the fishtail one, but then I don't have my work secured at the top, so it was being wonky.
Yep.
Yeah. So what I have here is just a regular braid. I just took one side here and then one side here. So treating those as one strand, treating this as one strand, and treating that as one strand. And then I just started braiding. So bringing one over, bring the other over, and this one over, and then just keep going like that until you get, and mine's a little on the side. I'm just debating if I want to be a perfectionist and redo it or not. But
my guess is that yes, you are going to want to be a perfectionist and redo it.
Or I could just not right now and it'd be good, right?
That is just my thought. So this is what my braid ends up looking like. It's just like a really cool, it almost looks a little bit like a rope. And there is a question that came through. It's a really good question. Unfortunately, we are not able to show in this class if somebody does something with a different kind of material, particularly if it's all Wildfire, how to end it. But I would suggest a couple of different things for that. The first is to make sure that you follow Beadalon on all of the socials, because then you will know when our classes are. We don't currently have, for Michael's, we have so many classes scheduled, but we don't currently have a looming class with just Wildfire to my remembrance right now. Yvette might have another remembrance for me, but there are a ton of YouTube videos, resources. If you go to the Beadalon website or the Michael's website actually and poke around in the instructions, there are a number of different ways of finishing off with clasps, which is what I would recommend if you did both your warping and your wefting with Wildfire, because the Wildfire is just a little bit too thin to do this particular technique. I mean, technically it would work, but it's not going to work kind of to my eye and to my happiness level. And again, you could do, oops, somehow I got doubles. There are any number of different ways of finishing off as well. For example, here, I actually added beads before I started my wrap. So you could add, this one also, I added beads here. It's kind of 2-on-1 to diminish and to bring those beads together. On this one, I actually brought in a bunch of beads. This one got a little bit loose. Here, let's try this one. To bring them in and do a knot and then a braid in there. So there are any number of ways of doing this. Danielle, since I am still working on my braid, are you at the point that you can show bringing them together and doing the knot on the end?
Yeah.
Or doing the macrame?
I'm going to go ahead and just do the macrame with one of my sides loose, if that's okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Perfect.
I saw in the chat something popped up that I thought was really cool. While it was still on a loom, it looks like someone was asking if you could taper down to 3 beads and then taper down to 1. And then it would make what I had happen here not happen, where my braid kind of went to the side. That's a really great idea. So I've learned something from.
Yes, I will, and thank you to the person who did suggest that, because I believe I will be teaching it like that from here on out. See, that's why I love teaching classes so much, is because I learn as much from my students as hopefully they do from me as well. So it's definitely a give and a take, and well appreciated.
And so all I've done here is I just brought, these would both be braided, but I brought them together. So just pretend this one is braided here. And I brought this one over and this one over, and I'm just laying them on top of each other. And then I have another strand of Beadalon that I cut, and it's running inside. I just brought it in the center here. I'm just gonna lay it down, and I'm gonna start tying square knots, macrame square knots, probably maybe 8 square knots in total. And so to do that, there's so many great Beadalon classes on square knots. I learned from watching the Beadalon class, actually. And if you were on the tying station, this would be easier. But what I've done here is I made a 4, and it doesn't matter which side you start your 4 on, just you have to stay consistent, switching back and forth. So now I'm going to cross this one over, and it's going to go, you know what, I'm going to turn this way just so that I macrame in this direction. Here we go. Now I know what I'm doing. So just making a 4 here, crossing over, and then bring that other strand up over this strand. Then you need to go under the work and up through that 4. And so that first one will have help us out because it's going to hold together all my strands. I'm just going to tighten those and slide it up a little bit. Okay, so there's my one side. So I did my 4 over here the first time. So now I'm going to do my 4 on this side, or now it's a P actually. And then bring that cord down. This is the one that was over here. Now I'm going to go under all the strands and up through this loop. Oops. I think there's actually, there's a Beadalon macrame class coming up too that the technique looked really cool. I was trying to figure out how's that done. I want to watch that one. And so I'm switching back to this side. So every other side, you switch the one that makes that first loop. Bringing this strand over this one. And then I'm going to come underneath all the strands and up through that loop on this side. And there you go. Just get that tight. And so I was on this side before, so now I'm going to go on that side of my loop. And bring this strand over that strand and then under everything and up through that loop. And so you just want to keep going until you have on the bracelet that Meredith held up, it looked like about 1/4 inch or so. I would say 1/4 inch would be great. Make sure you can slide easily. Just test that out as you're working. Because you want it to be tight, but not too tight that you can't pull it. So if things are still, just feel it out. It's going to pull easier if your braid's tighter. And if you forget what side you're on, you can hold it up and just see which side. So that is, I call it the hat. And I know my strands are too dark to really see, but I have a hat on this side, so I know I need to make my loop on that side because I forgot what side I was on.
I love that you call it a hat. I call it the bump.
You do? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was watching one of your classes on that as a refresher because I'm not a macrame guru. I just kind of wing it most of the time, and so I'm still trying to learn. I have some dreams of learning some new advanced ones.
One of the things that Danielle and I were talking about is using micro macrame technique as a finishing technique. And so we knew when we were talking about this yesterday that it was too late to change the entire class. But it sounds like there is some interest in perhaps some more advanced classes. So that would be one that would definitely fall into the advanced category of pre-planning colors and all kinds of kind of different and interesting ideas came out of it was a very kind of a 20-minute talk that Danielle and I had yesterday, but like I left just with so much to do. So many things that I wanted to make.
That was fun. Yeah. I'd had a lot of coffee at that point. So the ideas were just flying.
I know, I love it. So then when you are done with your macrame knots, what I do is once again, I come in with my cord cutter. I have the lid to it right here. Oh, here it is. I love, Danielle, does it happen to you that when you're in classes teaching, you put something down and then immediately can't find it again, even though it was just in your hands?
The scissors, always the scissors.
For me, yep, it's definitely the scissors, and then also the cord cutter, which clearly needs more batteries. All right, I'm gonna leave that out because I'm gonna need more batteries for it. And I'm just gonna snip these off with some scissors. But then what you have once you have put all of your once you've clipped off all of your edges, and you could even add like a really fun large hole bead here on the end too, just to add a little bit more something something to your bracelet. But I would suggest if you are interested in learning more about the jewel loom and learning more about looming in general, just start a Google search. Start a search on the Beadalon website is a great place to find patterns, to find inspiration. I'm sure on the John Bead has a lot of different resources as well for all different kinds of bead weaving, bead stitching, using different alternative materials to finish things off. And now I'm really regretting not putting little beads here on the ends. I think that would be really, really fun. Like I said, this technique is one of my favorites. And you can even, this is a sample that I had worked up as well. You don't even have to do a whole bracelet. You can just do a little bit of a little design here in the middle, and then have the thread or the cord be the star of the show with just a little bit of a loomed part in the middle. I do not use glue on these knots because with the thread zap or the Wildfire cord cutter, when it's working and you have actual batteries in it, what it does is it actually melts the ends. So it's actually better than glue because you're melting the ends and sealing them onto each other. So you don't need glue for your knots in this case. So Danielle, do you have anything else that you would like to add for our class today?
No, just dreams of new project ideas that I would love to try. I just got some ideas. Here's my.
I know. It sounds like everybody really enjoyed our joint class today. It was a fun experiment. I think we can definitely safely say that a joint class is going to last a little bit longer because there are two people doing the talking rather than one person doing the talking. But oh my gosh, so many great ideas coming through on the chat. So many wonderful participants who have joined us today. And Danielle, I cannot thank you enough for coming on to do a joint Michael's class with me. We're going to be doing one in the John Bead time slot in a couple of months. And by the time we get there, I'm sure that Danielle and I will have just next leveled all of these different ideas and all of these different techniques. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to look for that on the Michael's Community Classroom or on the Michael's YouTube channel. Make sure that you follow us on all of the socials. Again, Danielle, thank you so very much. The Beadalon classes are generally on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And every other Saturday, Sarah Ellis teaches for us at 2 p.m. Eastern time as well. Danielle, I believe your classes are Friday evenings, but your time slot is going to be changing soon. So I encourage people to just double check if you have her time slot on Fridays marked on your calendar. It's going to be changing, hopefully for a more convenient time for everybody going forward. So that is it for us for today. Thank you again, everyone, so very much for joining us. And until next time, happy beading.